Hello there, YouTube. Welcome back for part 2 of my Sutton Hoo Helmet Project. Um, I took several hours and I took some fine-grained steel wool and a steel wire brush and a lot of elbow grease and a lot of time, and I'm very happy with the results. I've just sprayed it down with WD-40 the other day and kept it enclosed in a plastic bag because, well, hopefully you could tell that it was coated with surface rust. And when I was brushing it off, I mean, it was just flaking off. I actually wore an apron and put on another shirt that I knew was going to get dirty because it was just all over me and it stained my hands orange. And I'm not kidding. I worked that the day I got the helmet and I made the video. I went outside shortly after because I knew it was going to be a mess, and sat on the back patio and just worked away on it for a couple hours and looked pretty good. I thought I would rub on a coat of Brasso, thinking the Brasso would actually protect it or draw out some of the rust or absorb into the steel to preserve it from getting rust, but I ended up putting a coat of surface rust back on it again that I had to kind of work off. But second time I worked on it, I was pretty quickly able to buff that off. And I'm sorry, I just had something pop up on my screen here. But I was quickly able to buff that off, and I was using that steel brush primarily for the majority of it, especially in the facets of the bands. But I think you would be impressed with how it turned out. This is the same helmet. I didn't buy a second one. This is the same helmet. You can tell, you can see some black spots on it. There's a little bit of pitting. This back part actually got it the worst. And I was surprised that like these rivets here on the sides, those are brass. And there is a few spots on top. That's actually some soot from the floor of the garage, which is why I sprayed it again and then put it in that plastic bag. On the inside, I don't know if you can really see it as well. I mean, I kind of was able to get some of it, but it's just hard to get the angles on it. But like I said, I'll even put it on and show you the difference here. But it's a totally different look than the way it was before. Orange, brown, disgusting. Now I think I'm happy with where it's at. After the fact, I realized, I could have just got a steel brush head for a drill. We actually use some at work to, in case you don't know and haven't seen my other videos, I work in the restaurant industry, and we have used steel bristled brushes to polish up steel surfaces that have been neglected for one reason or another, and it'll just rip off the grit and bring that shine right out. And like I said, after the fact, I thought, I could have really used that, but there was doing it by hand, like along these edges where these bands are, really working that brush linear to that. I was really able to scrape, and I mean scrape, the rust off. There was a layer of rust, and then especially like these brass pieces, I mean, this really polished up very, very, very nicely. But it still is pitted. It is not in perfect condition. And I wouldn't sell it, so it being in mint condition is actually not a big priority for me. There's still some grease on it from a WD-40, which if you've again seen my other videos on armor, I initially used WD-40 on like my mail and my helmet and my sword. I've actually switched to olive oil is what I use, or linseed oil is a natural oil. With the olive oil, more on the male, and because it's black and male, it's a mixture of olive oil and charcoal, and then there's a heat treatment to re-blacken it and recoat it. But that's another video. But I did use WD-40 because that's what I happen to have, and I actually used a little bit of WD-40 after I used that Brasso on it, and then I wiped it clean with, because you can't leave it on there. You have to wipe it off, and then I buffed it with the WD-40, and that really brought out the shine and balanced out the color, because the pitting still kind of retained a bit of a reddish hue to it. And with the WD-40, and when I buffed it out, it turned that paper towel orange again, even though it didn't. There was none coming up when I had removed that final layer of Brasso, because I did the Brasso and then did a once over with a clean rag to pick up any other chemical on there, and then I did the spray it with the WD-40 and just kind of buffed it in. And I think so far that's actually holding. I'm not going to leave that as its permanent treatment. In fact, what is probably going to happen, because what I want to do is, as sturdy as this helmet really is, I don't think I'm going to use this as a combat helmet. I want to use this as a reenacting helmet. But there's some things I'm going to have to do to it. First, some acknowledgments I'm going to have to make on its historicity, and that would be, first, let's take a look at that brass on there. It has a very similar cut and arrangement to the original Sutton Hoo, but the original Sutton Hoo, I believe that was gold, not brass. And it was had a texture to it. I don't know if it was cast like that, or it was shaped like that, heated, chiseled, shaped in that. But in the original, like the eyebrows would actually have a texture to them. The mouth would have a texture to that as well. This part would actually be a mustache going above an upper lip, and then there was some detail along the sides of the nose piece. But of course there is variation. Not every helmet's going to be the same. Is this 100% historically accurate reproduction? No, it is not. If that's what I wanted, I would have bought that. And there's no way you're going to get 100% historical reproduction for $15 off eBay. But what I wanted to do is I had this idea of painting it. And I've seen examples in artwork going back to 9th, 10th century France, and in and around the Mediterranean. Usually it's you start seeing like the standard conical with the nasal form painted in different colors. In later artwork, once you get the great helm and the enclosed full face helm, you see them in different colors, and it could be artist renditioning, but you start seeing them in red or blue, or sometimes you see them with a cross painted on the front. And then in later examples, there are many Renaissance examples of painted helmets, and they tend to be the less, at least from what I've looked at, either at the few museums I've actually gone to that have some, or online museum collections that you can look at your leisure. The painted helmets tend to be the ones with the worst craftsmanship. They tend to be the uglier, more crude ones, and then you kind of get this coat of paint to polish up the turd, so to speak. And the paint jobs actually are quite often very elaborate and very interesting. A lot of them tend to be late medieval Renaissance is when you see them, and they're generally like a sallet or I don't even know if it'd still be a kettle helm, but if you're familiar with it, the kettle helm that goes down so far that there's two little kind of goggle slits in them, and then the brim actually ends about here. So it's kind of like a hybrid between a sallet and a kettle helm, because it goes down so far, and then you can wear the bevor with it, or chainmail underneath, or just go it alone if you're feeling, or your budget doesn't allow you to fully encase your head. But they'll be painted, anything from repeated geometric styles to like a monster's face. That seems to be one that's repeated a lot. Also, I've seen a couple different ones. They've both been sallets that I believe are attributed to Germany. I know one is attributed to Germany for sure, because it has the Lord's Prayer painted on it, kind of wrapping around the helmet, wrapping around the edge of the helmet. So there is precedence for it. Greek helmets, there's a lot of speculation that, especially with, you get the Corinthian helmet with the big cheek pieces, and the side, and especially the dick-shaped top, which is just this big kind of flat reinforced shield. There's evidence that those were painted. From what I understand, the evidence draws purely from archaeological work, as in terms of the art, rather than the actual helmet having flecks of paint on it. But I could be wrong. And this kind of fits that. It's obviously not the same period, because between the Corinthian helmet and the Great Helm, which is two major examples I just gave, there's well over 1,000 years, and this falls right in the middle of it. But this is kind of a shitty helmet. Let's be honest. This is not. It looks kind of cool, but it's not gonna be the king or a warlord, or even a guy that owns his own couple of boats that's just looking to go a Viking and raid the nearest monastery, is probably wearing something nicer than this. It's going to be a similar style, but that brass work is going to be a little bit nicer. He's going to have some sort of detail or artistry in the bands, in the cheek pieces, in that face especially. At least that's what archaeological evidence for the Anglo-Saxon period. And we're talking about the 6th century AD to about the 9th century AD is when we have good, strong evidence for the fully enclosed. Not fully enclosed, but compared to just the pot helm, with the Spangen helm with the little nose guard, as you would see in the Bayeux Tapestry, because that's obviously going to be your best document for the end of the Anglo-Saxon period. This would actually be before that. There could have been some at the battle, but we have no record of it, and it's generally assumed that this style died out for one reason or another. I'm sure once I use it more, I could find some flaws that might encourage me to draw some conclusions about why that is. One I'm already coming up with is these ridiculously big fucking cheek pieces that, actually looking at this style, it's very reminiscent of Roman armor towards the end of the empire, and that very well could be influenced from that, because we are talking about end of the 6th century is probably considered the end of it. The late 5th century is really considered the end of the true Roman era. The Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, continued on, but their use of Saxons and Franks and the Frisians, etc., were quite limited in that era and didn't pick up for another few centuries, as I mentioned in the last video, the Varangian Guard. But that's, again, another video. So what I'm going to do with this one, sorry for the Sorry for the screen jiggle. I'm sitting on a bed, as maybe you can guess. My former studio, as it were, is no longer available, so this is where it's happening. Anyhow, what this project is going to become is what I'm actually thinking I'm going to do. Is I'm probably going to mask off these brass areas, and then the rest I'm going to use like a Rust-Oleum or a good spray paint primer, which it's not historically correct. There's going to be a couple things I'm going to do to this that aren't historically correct, and mostly they're budgetary cheats, or yeah, they're going to be budgetary cheats, because in theory we could reproduce everything we need to make it historically correct, but I'm not starting with a historically correct helmet, so I'd like to experiment with some ideas rather than make it perfect, because I can't. I couldn't remove the rivets and rebuild the helmet. And on that, removing the rivets, I mentioned it briefly in the last video, but for a suspension system, I would have to drill through the sides of the helmet. I don't know if I want to do that. So what I mentioned is doing, it'd be a concentric rings of padded rings that will kind of layer on top of each other and encase the top of the head so it kind of floats in there, and then have more limited cheek and back of the neck padding, and possibly be even, although that would also require a little bit of drilling on my part, but I could see myself doing a little bit of drill work like right in here and right on the bottom here to kind of put in a U-shaped pad, so that way it's not smashing against my face. But that's going to be the only drilling I'm going to do. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of make a separate, basically an arming cap specifically for the helmet that'll raise it up to a good eye level, also give me a good amount of raising it above my head so it doesn't touch my shoulders, and so it's not in physical contact with my head. Even though it's not going to be a battle helmet, I do want it to fit comfortably like a helmet should. And then on the helmet, like I said, after I've got it primed, probably go with a gray primer. I've always found that gray primer gives you the best balance of a good brightness to your color, but also without losing that detail. I've found black primer. I have found that black primers tend to wash out your edges. You tend to get a very dark look, and my interpretation of not only Anglo-Saxon art, but any of the post-Roman era Germanic tribes, even all the way down to the Visigoths, all along that northern Atlantic coast, back up to the Danes, past the Jutland Peninsula into Scandinavia, like to use bright, vivid colors. Very intricate and tedious designs. You see a lot of kind of these swirls and knotwork, similar to the Celtic kind of knotwork that's common with tattoos, but a unique style on its own. And each nation, with a little bit of attention to the details, Visigoth, Frankish, Anglo-Saxon, Norse, all tend to have very unique characteristics, although they share a similar style, a very similar northern Atlantic, northern European style that was different from what the Byzantines for sure were doing at the time, and to the Italians to some extent, but there are enough competing cultures in Italy during that period that I'm not even going to attempt to try and pretend I understand what the fuck was going on in Italy from about 6th century to the 10th. At least not in this video. But after I've got it primed, what I would like to do is in each little quadrant, I want in the same kind of knotted Saxon Norse type style, different animals that have representations that I can reference of different animals that represent certain strengths or represent certain cultural ideas in the Saxon culture, or in the Norse culture. Might have to borrow some kind of Norse artwork, because there's a lot more there's a lot more images of Odin than there is Woden, his Saxon counterpart. So I feel it wouldn't be too inappropriate to steal that from there. But I was thinking probably have like a deer, a wolf, a raven, and a boar, one in each quadrant. And then on these sides, I wanted to do probably, I found some good artwork of Odin that I wanted to do. And then on the other side, I wanted his two ravens that accompany him on the opposite side. And then along this back band, probably break it up into two sections, and have a couple images of warriors fighting, which, if you do take a look at the original Sutton Hoo helmet, with the silver plates, because it was silver plated. It had, or at least it's in these kind of boxy squares. I don't know if they were welded finally when they're put on the helmet. I haven't had the privilege of actually analyzing the original one. I'm just looking at books that I have access to, and internet images that are free, courtesy of whatever museum happens to be holding that, or held it at the time, or borrowed it to put those images on the internet. But then kind of tied all together with doing, sorry you can't see that, with doing along the bands here, doing connecting kind of the long bands of knot work that usually border art, or can be seen at the hems and cuffs of clothing. And then on the front, we'll do some stylized work in the eyebrows, and the same kind of stylized work to create like a mustache and a beard. And then probably go with some good strong colors. I have not decided exactly what I want to do, but I may actually do the beard itself, the facial hair. I may allow that to be done in a two-tone, kind of a brown and possibly a tan or a cream. And then I was thinking for the rest of the helmet, probably go with either a blue or a green, and then once again I would repeat that cream color in there for the detail work. But I'm gonna try out a few things. I'm gonna work with the colors, not on the helmet. I'm gonna kind of do some side-by-side comparisons on just a sketchbook or Canson paper, just kind of paint some stuff out, see how it looks, work with the colors before I set anything, because once it's on the helmet, it's done. And I think even if it's not the most historically accurate helmet, I think having it historically inspired would at least be appreciated by the ancient Saxons, and at the very least it'll be a fun project to work on. Once I've got the liner or some of the paint work done, I've got a new step, I'll happily do another video. But I've been going on for nearly a half an hour with this one, so I'll let you go with that. But again, if you're looking to clean up a helmet, Brasso, steel wool, and a good brush, and you can make an orange piece of shit look like this. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed.